And welcome to Dan's Morning Coffee Rant. I am the spiritual anarchist. I am Dan Arnold. This is my first ever live broadcast on Revolution Radio. I've been doing podcasts since 2019, and I've been interviewed on live radio before, but this is my first ever actual live radio show that I'm doing myself on Revolution Radio. So for all the listeners, if you get any value out of Revolution Radio, and I'm sure you do, please go to Revolution.radio.com, and at the top of the page they have a spot for donations. It's how they bring the truth to you guys. It's how they have this platform open for all of us. So at any rate, I want to thank Revolution Radio for giving me a platform. And I'll start this off just by telling you guys a little bit about myself. I am a former ex-order follower. And some of the things I'm going to talk about on this radio show have to do with the immorality of order following. And I want to be clear, I left the order following ranks in 2015, well before 2020, when a bunch of cops were standing down and kneeling and refusing to do this and refusing to do that because of their political beliefs. I went back in 2019 briefly, in January 2019, and I did a 24-hour period on an island where I worked 2 shifts. And, you know, I thought if I went back maybe the second time, if I could just police more better and police more harder, you know, I'd be able to make a difference. And, well, no, I didn't. And then I started, you know, my spiritual awakening, Dark Night of the Soul, came in 2014. I'm going to get to that. On this radio show, I'm going to be talking about my near-death experiences. I've died twice. The last time was in 2017. It was amazing, and there was light involved and all this other stuff. I am a spiritual person. I am not religious. So I'm going to probably be insulting a lot of people who are religious, and believe me, I don't mean to, but, you know, God with a capital G, Age Knows calls it the Father in the Sea of Lights, that creative force that created us is not some bearded dude in the desert sky that wants blood sacrifices of men, women, children, animals. That's just not God, folks. But anyway, I'm not going to get that big yet. What I want to talk about is my bumper. If you hear my bumper on Revolution Radio, it's going to sound like it's from the Avengers. I had 2 friends less than a month ago die within a week of each other from cancer. And, you know, this is after last year they did all that burning of all the chemicals that they claimed was a Canadian wildfire. I'm sorry, it smelled like burning electric wires. It didn't smell like bonfire wood to me. So I was with a friend of mine, a psychic friend. I've had many psychic women come into my life, and that's important because they do represent to me the sacred feminine. And I was with one of them, and her name is Psychic Sonia. Hi, Psychic Sonia, if you're listening. She does ghost tours in Medina every Wednesday. Look her up, Psychic Sonia. She's also a Bigfoot researcher. She's been on national TV. I was sitting there with her, and all of a sudden she says, "Did you hear that? Hold on. She made me hush. She's like, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "No." And she's like, something's here with you. There's a spirit here with you. They're standing right there. And he said, he's like, he had to muster up all his strength to try to get through to me. He's on the other side, and he yelled, "Forge! Forge!" Well, my friend Danny, who passed, I'm going to dedicate this first show to him. He worked a forge. He was a metal worker. He 2011, he actually made 2 different Captain America shields when they were filming here in Cleveland, the Avengers. So I'm like, wow, you worked a forge. What a coincidence. Well, when it came time to make my bumper, and I'm searching for some royalty-free music. Of course, I'm a comic book geek, so I'm looking at some royalty-free Avengers music. And lo and behold, I came across a song called Forge. And let me see here if I have it. Maybe I can play it. I'm not sure if it'll come through. It should come through. Hold on a second. This is the bumper. It might have already been on here. Let's see here. I'll play it real quick. Welcome to Coffee Rants with Dan. I am the spiritual anarchist, Dan Arnold, your host. Tune in for what's really happening every Thursday. That's Thursday at 9 a.m. in Studio A on Revolution.radio. They keep us in fear to manipulate us. They want us ignorant so we're easier to enslave. They make us murder one another so they don't have to do it themselves. Only you can break their mind control by getting the contradictions within your belief systems that allows you to accept the lies in the first place. The time has come for us to remember our divinity, who we really are, to return to what we're meant to be, service to others, to humanity, to return to nature, and reclaim our birthright, that which is freedom. The truth will sound belligerent because it is in direct opposition to lies. So we get angry because anger is sacred. And together we can unite and rise. Rise from this darkness. Humanity, assemble. Yeah, so hopefully that came through pretty good. And the last thing I said there was humanity, assemble. So one of the things that makes my story a little bit, let me back up a second. I don't do a script. And I do have some notes written down, but I'm not a fan of doing scripts. Although I've taught classes, I'll get more into my background, but I'm not a fan of scripts. When I went back in 2019 to do that policing thing for 2 more shifts, one more time to see if I could do it more better, I came across a researcher who had done a presentation called Cosmic Abandonment, and I'm sure everyone on this show is familiar with Mark Passio's work. And he's really motivated me. And Mark, since I'm mentioning your name, if you happen to hear this, in 2020, I sent you an email, and I was hoping to see you in person again before now so I can actually apologize to you in person. I had a good idea in that email that I'm sticking to, but I came across as a little ignorant, and my confidence had taken a couple of hits. So I just wanted to say, and I'll say it publicly, those 5 long-forgotten words, I'm sorry I was wrong. With that said, you may not have ever even got the email, so the apology still stands. Brother, thank you for, giving people the courage to speak out. And I'm hoping that I can do the same thing. I'm hoping I come across some of my ex-former police officers who, used to claim that they were oath keepers. Every election year, they definitely were oath keepers because they voted red. And they were part of what I like the term is the Republicrats. I don't believe we're going to vote our way out of this. But anyways, I never went back to police work because of that presentation. After I went through about a day of cognizant dissonance, how can we be the bad guys? Because I know you police officers out there, a lot of us get into this job with this idea we take this oath and the only thing we pay attention to is the protect and serve part. But throughout human history, every single atrocity that's ever been carried out has been carried out by order followers, mercenaries. The Roman centurions were the order followers of Jesus' time. And I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in what Jesus taught. And all the prophets, they were trying to teach what God really is, that you have the divinity, the divine spark is within us, that we are all God. We are all part of God. So when my friend Dan screamed over to me, and by the way, Dan, if you're listening, I know you are, thank you, brother. I'll go ahead and admit on the radio, as we were growing up, he was a better quarterback than me. But anyway, and believe me, he let me know that. Thank you for your help. But it's just, to me, that's kind of more evidence that there is an afterlife when spiritual mediums can connect you to someone who's passed. In 2021, I had another spiritual medium I sat down with, and it was a male. I had a bunch of female psychic friends who said, you need to get a male's perspective. And this is me talking about other people and not getting into my own abilities that are developing, but he sat down with me. He didn't use cards. He just asked me my birth date and my name. He started writing stuff down, and he said, Daniel in the Lion's Den. He's like, no fear. He said, go into that cave you're afraid to go into. They're going to know you're a friend. He said, look between now and your birthday. You're going to have a surprise. Be looking. Something's going to come up. And it'll be a chance of a lifetime for you. Just be looking for it. He's like, your grandfather, Anthony, is here. I'm like, holy cow. He knew my grandfather's name. He's asking me to ask you something about the Marine Corps on the rifle range. Well, when I was on the rifle range back in 1991 in the Marine Corps boot camp, I get pulled off the range to be told. I was just about to say be advised, to be told that my grandfather had died. He then went on to tell me about me and my brother, and he named my brother by name. And he said that, beef we were having was going to end. There was a new cycle coming. And I was just left there amazed. He just looked at me and smiled, and he said, I don't know why I know what I know or can do what I do. I just know I'm not of this world. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you none of us really are of this world. More and more people are being born with shamanic things where there's abilities that humanity's starting to naturally evolve into and develop, which is what I think they want to shut down. But anyways, I can get off on tangents here. Getting back to some of the things that I did, I was a United States Marine. I was trained in infantry and security forces. I was stationed at the U.S. Naval Academy. I was trained in basic surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. I was trained in anti-terrorism, urban combat, that kind of thing. We did security for the ECAC towers, which at the time it was the communications hub for the entire Atlantic Fleet. Security or shock troops for the naval station, which at the time, I'm not sure if it is now, it was the largest naval station in the country. We really were just bullet mittens until like the SEALs got there or something along those lines. And I got out. I worked in a closed maximum security prison. I became a part-time cop during that time frame where I worked in several different jurisdictions in and around the greater Cleveland area. I did contracted work for the U.S. Marshals. I worked at NASA Security and Police. I worked at inner hospitals, inner city hospital security. I worked for a federal medical agency as a federal police officer with statutory arrest authority. And that is where I really started to see the true corruption. I should have been seeing it way before that. But then I got to see medical mercenaries, lying doctors. And this is 2012, 2013. So I actually left the ranks well before it was, something that a lot of guys started doing in 2020 because they didn't like how they were being treated. My outreach to you guys is real simple. I'm not against you. I'm actually for you. I know why you took the oath. And with the things that are coming up in our world, you guys aren't going to be able to keep your jobs and keep your oaths. The two will not go together. And that's known. And a lot of the older guys who've got enough years in, they're getting out of it because of that. 2 years ago in 2022, the Cleveland Police Department put on a police academy, large academy, about 45 cadets. 2 weeks into the academy, 43 of the 45 cadets resigned. So what were they being instructed or told? That these 42, 43 cadets had a crisis of morality because they didn't want to do what they were being told. What's more scary is why did those 2 or 3 stay? And that's what worries me. Because in order to understand, and I was talking with a friend of mine around here who's a sergeant around where I live, and I had to tell him, I talked to him for about a half hour one day. I was like, hey, man, I'm not really against you guys. I was with you. I was a defensive tactics instructor, and just so the audience knows. I used to have to teach these guys how to, not use excessive force. And a lot of the times the reason why excessive force is used, plain and simple, is they don't train. And if you don't train, you're going to escalate in your force. Every use of force I ever had, they were safely restrained and without being injured. And so was I, because I trained. But, as a police officer, I don't want to like virtue signal. I was more of a community policing officer. When I first started the job, I, wrote a few tickets, and this was like 1998, 1997. I wrote a few tickets, and the one time I wrote a ticket, I made this woman cry, and I felt like complete shit. And I said to myself, this isn't what I got into this job for. I got into this job to actually help people if I could. So I didn't write no more tickets. And it didn't make me any friends. It didn't make me no friends. In fact, on the federal job, when I wouldn't write any tickets, they would say stuff, and it was very like Game of Thrones-y there, very backstabby. It was just a terrible, terrible, terrible place to work. The universe is fractal, so is the government. It's the same no matter. If you go up higher, it gets a little more corrupt. You go down lower, it's still corrupt. They follow whatever rules they want to follow. But my cop friend here in the area I live in, he's like, no, dude, we agree with you. And most of us agree with you. So, I mean, that's heartening that they agree with me. I'm hoping more cops will speak out. Back in 2020 when all this happened, you had General Mattis, the United States Marine Corps General Mattis, one of the most beloved leaders in the Marine Corps. Used to always be memes about him, right? He out of nowhere resigned, and then he's over there in Seattle wearing a mask, telling everyone else to wear their masks. At the same time, Sheriff David Clark resigned. So what are these guys being read in on? What are they finding out? Or they're just, flipping over that quickly? And we need more people to have the courage to speak out. And this is my first time doing live radio. And, this is the year for everybody, myself included, to speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. And trust me, with some of the things I got to say, my voice will probably shake more than once. But, I wanted to do some investigations and how it works in law enforcement. And we can see this in the political realm right now. And it's really very triggering for me, to be honest with you. I'm healing in plain sight. So what that means is I've gotten over most of my traumas, probably 80% of them, but I'm not 100%. And if I waited till I was 100%, I know I wouldn't be speaking out. If I waited until I thought I had enough knowledge to speak out, I would never be speaking out. So it's time to I'll still be aggregating more knowledge, but I'm going to tell what I know, aggregate as I go. I lost my train of thought there. What was I talking about? Something with investigation. So what they do is you become like the brute squad. You become the personal brute squad for these politicians, or for the suits, or for the director of a medical center. And they tell you what laws to enforce, who to enforce them on, and who not to enforce them on. And with a couple of investigations I tried to initiate on patient abuse and on some other things that were going on that aren't worth saying, I was shut down. I didn't have any friends, basically. And when I got hurt in the line of duty in 2012, it led to a very, they circled the wagons, and it was a very hard fought thing. And that's just a terrible feeling. It led to being gang stalked. It led to constant surveillance. Even to this day, I have a little bit of that going on. They're going to watch you. So, order followers, you have to try to understand what actual objective morality is. And I don't think I'm some paragon of morality, but when you understand what a person's rights are, you'll be less likely to enforce crimes that are victimless. So rights are a verb. They're not an adjective. They're literally any action you take that does not initiate harm to another being. That's your right. And anything that steals or initiates harm is not your right. Well, what governments all throughout human history have done is nothing but steal people's rights. The human condition's been one of slavery. And as soon as they monetize stuff, the greed just kicks in. And we see this everywhere. War is monetized, so there's constantly wars. The criminal justice system is monetized. These guys can't get out and get a job. They end up right back in. So that's where I first started to see these counterdictions, and we have to heal the counterdictions. So if you heal a contradiction in a belief system, you can then throw away the belief system or find a belief system that is bereft of contradictions. And cosmic law or natural law is bereft of contradictions. It just is. You know, when you're working in a prison and you see a guy who's in there for selling a green leaf that he grew to another guy, right? To another adult, not to a kid. Kids can't consent. But an interaction between two adults is not immoral. In fact, if you ever read a book called Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper, and I'm sure this audience that might be listening to me has read that book. I was reading that book in July of 2020. I think it was chapter 6 that I was in, where William Cooper described exactly what was going on in 2020 and how they were going to use a fake medical, public safety emergency to lock us down, put us in masks. Also, part of the New World government is going to be they're going to legalize marijuana. And I have nothing against marijuana. But when I was working in the prison, I went like 27 years without smoking the stuff, or without, back then they didn't really have gummies like they do now and everything. But I remember seeing people in there who were in there for smoking pot or for dealing pot, right? A green leaf that grows. And they were literally selling right next to someone who ate people. Or someone who was a murderer. And it's worth saying, during my entire law enforcement career, that between all of it, it was probably close to 27 years, I thankfully have never murdered anybody, never used what they call quote-unquote deadly force. I only put 2 people in prison my whole career, and they were rapists. So what I started to see in the prison personally were people that didn't deserve to be there. In fact, COs would jokingly say, any of us can catch a case. We just haven't been caught, ha, 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 whatever. But, that's true. When you got a monetized system, you can catch a case over anything. So, a person who murders somebody, a person who eats people, sitting there next to a guy who did nothing but smoke a green leaf. What kind of education you think that guy smoking a green leaf and has got a felony for feels right now when they see that is completely legal all over the place? What that actually means, folks, is it was never immoral to do. That was a man's law. It wasn't nature's law. It's one of the things I also wanted to. That's me in a nutshell as far as law enforcement goes. I can get a lot more in depth than I probably will. I'll tell you what I am not. I just got done telling you what I am. I'll tell you what I am not. I am not religious. I'm spiritual. I believe in God with a capital G, a creative, force that created everything. But again, it's not some bearded dude in the desert sky. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a libertarian. I identify as an anarchist, and that word anarchist is not being used correctly. It's a CIA psyop to make people think that it means chaos. Well, originally, if you go, there's my cat. Don't worry, I'm not going to eat you, honey. That's a different part of Ohio. You're okay. You're okay. Anyway, an is the Greek prefix meaning without, and archon means ruler. So most people on this show will know that anarchy just means without a ruler. I know. You're okay. You're all right. It's my cat, if you guys can hear my cat. So the world hasn't broken out in anarchy, actually. The world has broken out in mind control. The world has broken out in government. Okay? I think we need to get rid of government. I'll tell a story here. About a month ago, we had a major 3 tornadoes that ripped through here. And by the way, Psychic Sonia was right about that. She told me over a year ago, she wrote it all down and gave it to me that we were going to have 3 tornadoes. Sure enough, we did. But it really did a lot of damage. Some people had no electricity for 6 days. The apartment complex I live in currently, 246 apartments, 500 to 600 souls in that building from all over the world. Various Arabs, black, white, Hispanic, Asian. And during that outage, everybody, now we only were out for, our electricity was out for 4 days. I know the true test will come when it's out for 2 weeks and people don't have medicine and other things are going on. But in that 4-day period, everyone in the building got along and helped one another. The police weren't called one time, nor did they actually come there. They're there every other day, but during that 4 days, they weren't there at all. Maybe they were busy with other stuff. Traffic lights. Everybody was letting each other go. Everybody was taking turns. Traffic was less hectic, actually. So there was no controls, authoritative controls actually needed. I say we did pretty good without any government authority during that time frame. That was just a small test of what real anarchy would be. The predator class wants to just keep us fighting one another. See, if we do the fighting for them, they don't have to face the negative consequential effects of the karma that's involved in the action of actually initiating harm to another being. And I don't know why some people aren't speaking more plainly, although I do see many people speaking plainly in the alternative media, but this isn't human-driven, folks. They went years and years and years with lying to us about extraterrestrials, the Roswell crash. And now all of a sudden there's all this disclosure. They put it out there first in media to get us used to it, then they do it. And I don't like to watch the mainstream news media, but I will tell people, watch it a little bit, because they're telling you what they're going to do. And people aren't amazed at how do they always know? Wow, they just always know. Yeah, because it's being fed to them to feed it to us. So when they start putting out into a collective about all these meteors and about all this and all that, and here's something else I got to say too. I'll back up a second and go back to the surprise that happened between 2021 and the spring of 2022. I kept being called a conspiracy theorist, and I don't believe the word conspiracy and theory need to be hyphenated, just like I don't believe the word masculine or feminine and toxic need to be hyphenated. The only reason why I hyphenate spiritual anarchist is because the majority of the public thinks anarchists are flipping over cars. No, anarchists don't want a ruler. That's people who vote who are downtown flipping over cars. True anarchists are peaceful, and they don't want you to know that, though. But I got so sick of being called a conspiracy theorist that I was like, you know what? Hell with it. I'm going to email our king, David Icke. So I sent an email to him. And I totally had forgotten about the email. And about a month later, I decided to check my spam folder. And lo and behold, I had a response from his daughter, Gamilla. And she said, David suggests 5 p.m. London time for a chat with you. How about April 11th? 411 information. So I got to have an hour. Actually, it was closer to a 2-hour talk with David Icke, but about an hour and 40 minutes of it was on the podcast. And after about the first 5 minutes went by, maybe not even that, I wouldn't even call it an interview. It was a conversation. David Icke can carry any interview. The hero worship or whatever, this guy to me has done a lot of work. You have a lot of respect for somebody like that, but that was gone. It was just 2 people talking about freedom, 2 people who want human freedom. And I plan on doing that with as many people as I possibly can. So I'm going to get back to what happened to me in 2017. In 2017, I went to the hospital. I couldn't walk. I was paralyzed. And the pain medications they were putting me on, everything, the steroids, they had me on really strongly, Dilaudid every 3 to 4 hours. The pain was intractable. It was unbelievable. My lungs were giving out. And here I was dying for the second time in my life. I had actually flatlined and died and had an out-of-body experience where I seen nothing but light when I was 6 years old, and had this weird dream about a bowling ball, a scared bowling ball with all these mean bowling pins. And I write about this in my book, Rise from Darkness, Who Are They?, where I talk about who they are a little bit and highlight other people's work that I think is really important to get to. And, I probably should plug that. I've given out books. The book was for free. Rise from Darkness was free. It was free on my website before I had to take it down. It was free. It still is free. If you go to the End of Slavery Summit 1, End of Slavery Summit, go to NITA.1, NITA.1. That's Corey Enderlot, does the End of Slavery Summit. We're doing the second one's coming up the 15th, between the 15th and 17th. Next show, I'll have better notes, and I'll give you an actual website. But if you go to Amazon.com and look up Rise from Darkness, Daniel Arnold, the book will pop up. And if you want, buy the book. There's another book I wrote called Violence and Ego. That was a catharsis of different violent events I had that I probably could have avoided, and the lessons I learned in those events throughout my entire life, including all my law enforcement stories. I got really good reviews on both of them. But I haven't done enough plugging of those things, so let me just throw that out there. But anyways, I'm in the hospital and realized I was 46 years old at the time, and I had died when I was 6. So I was just laying there, and my breath was giving out, and it was just like, wow. The last 40 years have just gone by quick. In fact, I couldn't believe how quick they went by. And I had this voice that wasn't my own come to me, and it said only love and discernment can drive out hate and fear. And it was like a mantra that was being repeated to me. So I'm laying there, and my eyes are closed, but yet I can see this light, this silver type of light just beneath my skin with my eyes closed. And it could sound as unbelievable as you think it sounds, but I'm going to tell you right now, reality is more fantastical than any science fiction, fantasy novel or movie ever written. And I'm laying there, and I see that, and the overall arching thing that just kept, the feeling that was just there was nothing left but love. And I know this is going to sound, because I've got a bad temper. And on my own podcasts, I end up dropping F-bombs, and I start really getting into it and talking about the stuff. This is my first time on live radio. I'll probably get like that, and I'll just say freaking, or I'll say effing, or whatever, because you're not allowed to drop F-bombs on the radio. But, I'm laying there, and I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of death. There was nothing I could do but accept it. And as I was laying there, all I remember thinking was, I just regret what I didn't do. I regretted my ego. I regretted chasing my ego. I regretted the petty arguments I allowed myself to get into. I regretted everything that I didn't do is what I regretted. And that's one of the reasons why I'm speaking out now, is because I'm pretty sure the third time's a charm. So the next time I'm on my deathbed, I want to sing my death song. I want to have no regrets. I want to die with a smile on my face if I don't get clapped the F out with what's coming up here in the world. But anyway, I was laying there, and I'm thinking, all this stuff. And I remember telling a young man that I ran into in 2020, only 21 years old at the time, but a very conscious spiritual person. And he was just asking me. He kind of reminds me of Corey Enderlot, actually. But he asked me, as I was telling him this story, I was telling him all the regrets I had, the things I didn't do. And he asked me, did you ever regret love? And I told him, no, I regretted, not loving more. But, it kind of gets me emotional. It does. So I'm kind of glad I'm not on camera. But I told the story once on camera, and I got emotional. Then I told it in person and got emotional. So there's more to this life than we can see. And the spirits that come back to this life, the ones that help us, they're just at a higher frequency. If you read a book called Holographic Universe by, let me look here real quick. This is live radio, so I got to look at something. Okay, there's a book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. It is, how long? It's about a 6-hour listen to. It really starts to spell out what type of universe we live in. And it really helped me understand why psychics can see the things they can see, possible future timelines. While I'm at it, one of the things I'll tell another story here real quick about law enforcement, because this is what we're dealing with. I'm getting way off track. Maybe I will do more of a script next time, but what the government likes to do is they like to get embedded with the private sector. We see this. We see the weaponization of law enforcement used politically. It was used politically on the department I was on. We had a chief leave. It created a power vacuum. Everybody was backstabbing for promotions. And, of course, everybody was using law enforcement powers against their perceived rivals. And, I wanted to get promoted back at that time, but I wasn't willing to kiss ass or backstab anybody for it. If I wasn't going to be on my own merits, I didn't want it. So basically I wasn't getting it because I didn't write enough tickets, and I really don't give a shit. Don't write tickets anymore. Even in 2020, when I'm on my way home from Florida, there's road Nazis on the side just, at a stop sign waiting for somebody to not make a complete stop. And you've got the public hating you. You got the public hating you, and you're still going to write tickets. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. So military, police, you have to, if you're going to really keep your oath, you're going to have to lose your jobs. Sorry. It's just the way it's going to be. But as I started to, reconcile my own contradictions and reconcile my own bad habits and unhealthy coping mechanisms, I realized, I needed to get out of that line of work, which is why I got out of that line of work. And I was talking about what I'm not. I'm also not a constitutionalist. If you believe in the Constitution, you're basically signing, to me, you're signing an agreement slip. And I don't agree to another human being scribbling down what my rights are on some piece of paper and handing to me another human being. Here's your rights because I scribbled them down and gave them to you. These are your rights. No, I'm sorry. I'll wipe my ass with that document. I know what my rights are. I was sovereign at birth. Freedom is my birthright. Freedom is all our birthrights. And that's what we have to start remembering, is freedom is our birthright. And the regular people of this world, I see this in the building I'm in. It's literally like the United Nations in there. The regular people of this world don't want to murder each other. They just want to live in peace, unaccosted. And most people do what they have to do to not incur the wrath of the government, the wrath of the house slaves. Okay? You've got the managers of the house, the servants inside the house. We'll call them the puppeticians, who report to, something that thinks they own the entire land and house. Then you've got the field slaves, which is the regular people. And then you've got the enforcement class, who are the other house slaves. And that's the police and military. And this is a hard pill to swallow when you spend so many years in it. But I was such a rebel in it, I realize now why I was. It just didn't sit right with me. And I've got copies of my last employee evaluations. I wasn't some bad employee. I'm not some disgruntled employee. In fact, they made sure they gave me a good evaluation with what they were trying to do to me. So thanks a lot, guys. It worked out real well. But anyway, I don't want to let my own bullshit come out, my own traumas, and I'm healing in plain sight. One of the books that I think is a really important book to listen to with what's going on in the world it's called Palestine, A 4,000-Year History. And I've probably only got, definitely less than 15, maybe 12, 13 minutes left. So I want to talk a little bit about the atrocity that's going on over in Palestine. Back 4 years ago, I lost all my left-wing friends when I called bullshit on the cooties. I also had my YouTube channel removed. I had a public Facebook channel with like over 3,000 followers, which I know is a drop in the bucket, but it got removed. Just the fact that they're trying to close out our freedom of speech, which is our birthright, all the censorship. I wouldn't even still be on YouTube or Facebook. The only reason why I'm still on those is because they're the people who I'm trying to convince. And a lot of the other places like Minds and Rumble and Odyssey and just other platforms you go to that don't censor you, they've turned into right-wing echo chambers that to me is only slightly better than the left wing. See, the real solution to this is not to feed the beast. Part of not feeding the beast would be don't vote. We're not voting our way out of this. And I'm probably speaking, into an echo chamber that already knows this. But anyone, I got new friends listening. Folks, we're not going to vote our way out of this. The whole world is on fire. And, like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy analyst. Conspiracies actually do exist. We're living in one right now. But this book is called Palestine, a 4,000-Year History. It is by Nur Masalaha, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is about a 16-hour listen. Okay? One book, 16-hour listen. I'm losing a lot of right-wing friends now because I'm against the ethnic cleansing that's going on in Palestine, which Palestine is the proper way to pronounce it. I've seen video where actual Israeli citizens, from Is It Real? Isn't real. Citizens who are actually protesting this. Again, the regular citizens of the world just mostly want to live, the ones who aren't mind-controlled, the non-voters, which is 2/3 of this country, actually, which is why we need to stand up and say no. We're not part of your cult. We're not part of the elephant cult or the donkey cult. We're not voting. We're not Demopublicans or Republicrats. I'll get into other conspiracies on here. Part of my background is I was on a couple of special response teams. I was a rifleman or designated rifleman or sharpshooter, sniper, whatever you want to call it. I know what I seen last month. That was fake. It was just as fake as January 6th. Mike Tyson bites Evander Holyfield's ear. There's all kinds of blood. A 5.56 round with the kinetic energy it has. It supposedly clips an ear and there's not even any mark in it. Hair wasn't even messed up. Come on, man. Anyway, I don't want to. I'll get into conspiracy stuff because it's going to be actual conspiracies. They're not going to be theories. If I'm saying something that I think is something, I will say this is a theory of mine. And the theory is always going to be based on research. And when I do eventually take callers and I get more, up to speed on the tech part of this, and I'm taking callers and I'm watching the chat channel and all that other stuff, I will take calls. And if I don't know something, I'll tell you I don't know it. I don't know everything. I don't think you should think you know everything before you get up and start speaking out against this injustice. You just need to do it. But this Palestine, they go on to tell you, and some of the history is the Great Deluge that happened in about 12,000 BCE. The Sea Peoples, or the Semitic people that we call the Semitic peoples, the Sea Peoples arrived in that area of the world, and the Philistines were one of the peoples that arrived